Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockersclub. I've got a cool new case here from Be Quiet. It's the Silent Bass 802. Alright, so looking at the side of the box, the specs here, we have, it looks like it handles everything from an EATX all the way down to a mini ITX. It is a mid-tower case made out of steel. We've got our USB 3.2 Gen 2. Let's see, Type-C, USB 3.2 Gen 1. There's a fan switch also. Drive base, so you can go up to 15 of the 2.5-inch solid-state drives. 7 included, and up to 7 of the 3.5-inch drives. 3 included, so we'll have to see exactly what that means. Pure Wings fans, we've got 2 of the, let's see here, Pure Wings 2. Okay, so 140, there are 3 of those 140 millimeter fans. There's your optional fan layout in the case, optional radiators. Looks like we can go all the way up to a 420 in the front, up to a 360 on the top. Air cooler, you can go up to 185 millimeters, at the length of your GPU, PSU, and there's the 4-step fan controller. Now when we look at the back of the box, here we have a very nice exploded view of all the components and how they relate to each other. Looks like the box took a pretty good hit right there. But when I got it out of the box, it's up there on the table. I didn't find any damage, which is a good thing. Okay, so looking at number 1 here, interchangeable top and front panels. So we have a couple options here on the front. We've got like a solid panel and a mesh panel. Same thing with the top. We have a couple of panels that are solid, and this one here, although you can't really tell, it is a mesh panel to let air through. Number 2, 3 Pure Wings 140, Pure Wings 2 140 fans. So we've got 2 in the front, 1, 2, and then 1 in the back for the exhaust. Number 3, improved noise reduction with extra thick insulation. That's good. State-of-the-art I/O panel with fan controller and USB 3.2 Gen 2 and Type-C, which we showed that earlier. Motherboard tray can be installed alongside the left panel for an inverted layout. And that is really cool. So you can basically take your motherboard tray and flip it over. And we'll show that here a little later. Let's see, number 6, extremely user-friendly handling. Okay, so that just means it's easier to change the internal components around. Detachable top bracket allows easy installation of radiators or fans. Water cooling ready for radiators up to 420. Generous dimensions and carefully planned internal space. So they're basically saying you've got enough room for an EATX in there, an extended ATX motherboard. Let's see, generous dimensions. Oh, we already talked about that. PSU shroud provides for various possibilities for professional cable management. 1 double HDD cage for your hard drives there. So that's what this guy is right here. With decoupled mountings, reduce vibrations and help maximize silence. Be Quiet is all about keeping the noise down. Power supply can easily be installed from the back of the case. That's good. Tempered glass side window, allowing superb view of the PC components. Now this here, this is the box that has the extra panels in it, so we'll look at that a little later. But the case comes in the very heavy styrofoam packing, and I really need to get it out so we can see what's going on. They're actually, the bottom feet or the rails that it sits on are sort of packed in the styrofoam. Alright, so here is the case. I've looked at a lot of Be Quiet cases over the years, and at first glance this has all of the earmarks of the quality that I've seen from Be Quiet. Just the way all the panels line up and the quality of the finish across the top. Of course the glass has a protective plastic there I'll peel off here in a moment. But I like the back of this case because I've got this really nice vented section at the top, so any heat that rises has a way out. We've got vertical GPU mounting capabilities, and what's interesting, as I just mentioned when I looked at the spec sheet, the motherboard is capable of being inverted, so this entire section here, this part of the chassis, can be flipped over, so that your I/O would be over here on this side and your fan would be down here on this side and your expansion slots over here. We'll see that here a a little later. And of course, those are the top panels that can be removed. We can see underneath there how that's all vented. And across the top there is the I/O. So there's the fan controller, fan speed controller. Here's your USB Type-C. Then we've got a microphone, headphone, power button. Looks like a reset, and then there's a hard drive activity light, and then a couple other USB ports. Now across the front, now this is the solid front panel. We'll get the mesh panel out here in a little bit. Wasn't sure if that was a filter panel that can be removed or not. And then this is the back side. Again, the finish across here is very nice. Very clean. Now I really want to draw attention to the manual here, and you should always become familiar with your user manual. But I would say Be Quiet probably has the nicest user manual that I've seen. They just leave nothing to the imagination. Everything is quite clearly spelled out, and I don't mean necessarily in words, but through their illustrations. So here's the exploded view, a much better view of what we saw on the side of the box, but shows what all the components are. And then when we get into it a little more here, the illustrations are just so clear as to your fan layout, radiator layout, and the components that are being discussed are highlighted. Like I said, they don't have a lot of text as far as describing the steps, but the illustrations really do everything for you. Sometimes these things can be confusing, but not with this manual. You won't probably find a better manual, one that's more well organized. The solid models there, they're just amazing. Very nice. So I highly suggest you sit down, spend a little time with the manual, and become familiar with what all is going on with your new case. So make sure you pay attention to your manual. Alright, so let's get the plastic off here. Now there's a lot of reflection here as I shock myself with the static on the glass, so it's hard to see what's going on, so I won't really focus on the inside until I get the panel off. So let me do that now. And the way to get the panels off, there are no fasteners to unscrew or anything like that. It's this little button here for the right panel and this little button for the left. So you just push it in like that. It's actually released. There you go. And it releases. So the panel pops out, and then you lift up and the panel comes out. Now looking at the inside of this panel here, you see how this area here is all vented. So this would be on the inside of the case. And it looks like there's a little vent there too, so you can actually have some air circulation that would travel up the glass and can go into this area and exit through here, although I don't know if that was an intention or just a consequence of the design. Either way. And my first casualty of the day here, always be careful when you're handling glass, because I dropped it halfway on this metal table here and I caught the corner. That's what it landed on, and I chipped a section of glass right off the edge here. It actually didn't leave a sharp edge at all. It actually smoothed it out and rounded it, but just be careful when you're handling glass. Most cases come with glass panels, and I'm always a little paranoid when I'm handling them. I'm surprised I haven't totally destroyed one yet, so I guess if I just chip the corner on one, I'm doing pretty good. But anyway, so here's the inside of the case, and what kind of caught my attention here is the case floor. It has these panels. Now since they're brand new, sometimes these things can be a little stiff to remove, but you can see it exposes a nice vented section there. You can take all these out, and there's a nice section that's dedicated as a fan mount if you want to put a fan there. And there's the very front one. So you can see this allows space if you put a front radiator in there and you need some extra room for the fans. Well, you've got like a little basement there to allow for clearance. Now this one here, I don't have to worry about cracking any glass. I just have to get it up out of the bottom slots on that bottom channel. There we go. And look at that. That is one big piece of insulation. Actually, it's sound deadening material to keep the noises from inside of your case from getting out. So, taking a quick look at the back of the case. Well, I said I was going to get these all these panels out here. So, there we go. Now, you can kind of see what the case looks like. And it has this dedicated bracket here that we can show you. It should slide out here. Let's see. Oh wait, it's screwed in there. Okay, so we'll have to take the screws out. Well, that makes sense. You really don't want this rattling around in there anyway. So those are the two included front 120 millimeter Pure Wings 2 fans. So to remove them, you'd take these screws out, or if you want to shift them around a little bit, but that would require you to take the front off. And I believe this just slides up. Yeah, you got to be a little forceful with it, and I kind of had to push from the bottom at the same time. But anyway, this panel pops off. My guess is, yep, on the back side of this one, it has the same extra thick sound deadening material there. On that panel, set it off to the side, and now we can look at the front dust filter. So that pops off easily. I always like Be Quiet cases. They're not the only ones who do it, but their filter panels remove nice and easily. Some of them, they're pretty violent. By the time you yank that tab to get that out and yank it, well, you create such a disruption that all the dust that's attached to the front of your panel pretty much flies off and goes into the air and just makes a big mess. So I notice things like that. So let's see, is there nope, no filter panel down there. So with the two 140 millimeter fans in the front. Now you'll also notice the side panels here. If I get the light just right, you can see these are also vented, and if we look on the side here, this is where the air can be drawn in. So when you have that front solid cover that I just took off on there, you have to have a way for the fans to get fresh air in, and they do from these two vented side panels. So the air goes in straight this way, makes a 90-degree turn, and then the fans can do their job with it. And I'll point out, these are the panels that came off the top of the case, but you can see they have magnets there in the corners, which help keep them located in the proper position, and also that helps to keep them from rattling around. And I really shouldn't have laid those on the top because we don't want to scratch that up. So if you take them off, make sure you set the insulation side down so you don't scratch up your new panels. And looking at the front a little more closely, you can see how that area is completely opened up and ready to accept the 420 millimeter radiator if you want to go with one that large, but that would take up the entire front surface there. Also, if you would like, now I had to pop this out, this took a little bit of effort, but your complete power supply shroud there comes out, so you can really get into the bottom of the case if you need to. And that really comes in handy, especially during your case build when you're fishing all of your power cables around through the bottom. Well, you can get into them from the front as well as the back, and almost the top here too if we take this hard drive cage out. Then of course there is the hardware box, or accessory box, whatever you want to call it. And let's see what all is in there. Okay, so these are, okay, that's your basically mount for a hard drive. And it's got some holes there for a solid state drive also, if you want. It's got them on both sides, so it looks like you could put two solid state drives in this cage. Now I have the case flipped over here, so this is actually the bottom of the case, and this is the filter panel. And this here is actually the removable part. So I pulled on this piece from the front before, but I just didn't pull hard enough to get it to release. So that's what that is. Now, It also comes with these feet. These go on the bottom of the case because the way I had it a moment ago, it was just sitting on this face here, but you really need to install the feet. And the nice thing, what they do there is there are no fasteners for it. It just clips in there. So I'll get these both snapped in. So there are a couple little pockets. Let's see if I get this right. I guess they can, yeah, they can go on either side. You just have to get them started. And when you do, there you go. They snap right in. So, and you can tell it's got the rubber feet there. So what you have to do actually is you got to get one side in there at the bottom and then kind of pull up at the top. Give it a little bit of, or push on the bottom. There we go. All right, that wasn't too bad. And the way those snap in there, my guess is they're never really meant to be removed. So now we'll go ahead and flip this back over. And actually the feet are a little wider than the glass top here. So I guess I'm not going to use my turntable here because this thing will fall off. All right, so hang on a moment. So looking at hard drive coverage, and good news, I was able to actually turn it 90 degrees and it seems to be pretty stable on here, so I think I'm good to go to keep using my turntable. Alright, so your 3.5 inch drives, they give you, according to the manual, they give you seven spaces, and it says 3 are included. So what that amounts to is down here in this removable hard drive cage, you can get 2 3.5 inch drives here, and then they give you this little included cage, so there's your third one right there. And you can order more of these if you want to, and I think the way to keep costs down is your 3.5 inch drives, they certainly haven't been obsoleted by any means, but they're not quite as popular as they once were. So if Be Quiet were to supply you with 5 of these, that's a lot of extra cost, and most people will probably just throw them back in the box and not use them because solid state drives are certainly gaining popularity. So you've got 5 slots here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and these pop out. So if we look at the inside of the case, these are really just decorative plugs. If you don't use any of these hard drive cages, then you just leave those plastic plugs in there. And they look nice. They just sort of add some closure there to what would normally be a bunch of holes. So, and I'll show this here in a moment, but this hard drive cage would mount. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you want to add that many hard drives. So there are 5 there, and then the 2 available down here, that gives you 7. And as far as solid state drives go, the manual says there are spaces for up to 15. However, it says only 7 are included, which means 7 are available as you get the case. So the obvious ones are right here is 1, 2, and 3 on the back, and on the hard drive cage here there's a space on the floor for 1 more, and then 1 more on the top surface. So there are actually 2 here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. And let's see, it says there are 7 included. I guess if you want to use this, you can mount one there. These 4 holes right here, 2, 4. So there's 1 solid state drive. Flip it over and you got the same 4 holes. So there are the other 2. So you can indeed get 7 solid state drives mounted in the case. Now for the 3.5 inch drives, if you want to put that hard drive cage right here in there, you have to pop this out. So you squeeze these together and sort of push a little bit, and when you come around to the front you can pull that out. So now you have the opening there that is made for the hard drive cage. So you look at it, it has one fastener on the top and two on the bottom, so you figure out, let's see, looks like that goes in there like that, and then you attach the fasteners, and then you get those tightened up. Probably want to use a screwdriver, and then when you come around to the front, that's what your hard drive, removable hard drive cage would look like. So however many you want to purchase to finish it out, if you need some more, that's how you do it. Now if you want to take the bottom hard drive cage out, sometimes you have to loosen these screws with a screwdriver, which I already did. That just makes them a lot easier to remove. But if you wanted to, you could pull this hard drive cage out completely. You can see again that's made for two of your 3.5-inch drives. And now you can see there's quite a bit more room under there. And this bracket, you can see, has screws that hold it in, so this bracket can be removed. And looking in at the motherboard tray in a little more detail, I can knock some of the glare down here, move my light out of the way, maybe not. What Be Quiet does, and not everybody does this, but they have a legend back here that's stamped into the back of the case, and it tells you, based on which motherboard form factor you're using, which studs to use. So you can look at this as a guide, and the studs have letters by them, so you can tell which stud location to use, and that's really helpful when you're building your system. And looking at the back here, this is the fan controller, and you can see the included fans, so the two front fans and then the rear fan are all attached here. And we have 3 more positions, and these are 3-pin connectors. But we have positions for up to 3 more fans that can be controlled by the case switch at the top. Alright, so now I get to start taking things apart. So we'll start here with this bracket that holds the top radiator in, or fans, however you want to look at that. So there's a screw here, and there's one over here on this side. And when you take those screws out and drop them in the bottom of the case, which I'll dig that out here in a minute. Anyway, don't drop your screws in the bottom of the case. Anyway, that bracket slides right out, and you can see it has some, it has these rails right here that it slides on. But anyway, this is where you would attach a radiator or fans, and you can do that sort of ahead of time, and then line those 2 rails up, and then this slides right back in. Very nice, very convenient. And of course you want to put the screws back in so this thing doesn't slide around, and I'll find that other screw here in a minute. Anyway, the next thing, and probably one of the coolest things I think about this case, is the way this motherboard tray can be inverted. So right now it's on what I'll call the back side of the case, where you take it out, flip it over, and it goes on this side of the case. And I always thought that was cool because not everybody, you know, if you set this case next to your desk, and if your desk is on this side and the glass panel is on this side, well, that's great because you can see inside your case. But if you want to put the case on the other side of your desk, well, then the glass side is going to be all blocked. And you can take that side now, flip the motherboard over, and put everything on this side. So now you can see everything through the glass that way. So that's kind of a long-winded explanation of what that affords you to do. So now let me see how easily I can do this. I'll have to get these cables sort of disconnected from these cable ties. So as long as these cables here, and it looks like we've got plenty of length, reach this operation of flipping this over, shouldn't be too bad. So as long as I don't drop any more screws down in the bottom of the case, I should be doing all right. Oop, almost, not quite. Now this might be a part that you want to fast forward through, because I know watching me take some screws out is not very exciting, although it looks like there are only 6 screws to do this. last one. I need to hang on to this. Make sure that it does not fly out. Now this whole back panel has to flip over too, so there are probably some other screws here. Let's see. Yes, 3 more on this side. And these aren't just regular screws. They actually, it's hard to tell, they're actually a little shoulder screw there. So don't lose any of these because they're not just a regular screw. All right, now, let's see, that should be all it takes to slide this out. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, so it's detached over here on this side, other than the cables getting in the way. And I think I'll just go ahead and disconnect these, which is not as easy as I thought. There we go. And we'll take that one out too. All right, now, oh yeah, that whole section there looks like it will now come out. Big thing here is just not snagging the cables. Okay, yep. So let's see. Okay, so everything else is riveted together. Looks like I'm catching on this edge here. Just about. There we go. All right. Looks like it's better to go actually out this way than to come out the back. All right, that makes sense. So there's the whole chassis. So let's see here. If we want this to go on this face here, that means I need to actually flip it over like this. And then kind of go in there. Okay, let's see. Oh, that's not bad. Not bad. So we sit in there like this. Oh, very nice. That wasn't bad at all. Okay. So now that I know how to do it, I could do that much faster if I needed to. So it'll be interesting to see what the motherboard looks like when it is in this inverted orientation. Now I got to watch my fan cable here. Make sure I don't pinch it. Which it is. I guess, can it run there? Yeah, I guess it's not hurting anything, so we're okay. You know how it is, a lot of times you get stuff all assembled and then you realize you got a cable pinched. Yep, that'll work. All right, so now I'll start putting these screws back in. And what I'll have to do is figure out how to get that section of cables mounted properly. All right, so we got those 3. Should be 3 in the front here. That's going to look really funny with the motherboard upside down. And then one at the top. And let's see. I got 3 screws left, so I guess those go. Yep, those go on this side here. So those go. And that makes sense because you have to secure that side of the chassis. But I will say these are really, really easy to get to. So that really didn't take very long. There. So now the trick is just, slide that up a little bit there. The trick is just getting all of these kind of run around to the other side. And that was really not bad at all. And as I'm looking at this, I realized I was trying to test fit this Pure Loop Be Quiet cooler in here. And I tried the top and it wouldn't quite fit. And I realized this bracket has to be flipped around also. And that's what these little threaded inserts are for. Because it would not fit, the fans would hit the back of the motherboard, and that's because the radiator is actually offset to one side. So what I need to do is get these screws out and try not to drop it. Try not to drop this screw down into the case again, like I almost just did. And this comes out, flip the case around, and it should go in like that. Okay, so now that will put the offset for the radiator in the right position if I want to mount it in the top. So that's what the problem was there. And also, this bottom bracket right here, that is for the hard drive cage, probably, well, maybe not. I'll have to look and see if the shroud, this may not matter if it's on this side or this side. It does seem to add some stability to the floor, so I don't know that I necessarily want to remove it all the way if I don't have to. So I might just leave that in there. But anyway, I was trying to test fit the radiator and figure out, with the motherboard in the inverted position, what made the most sense. And a lot of times you see the radiator flipped over with the tubes coming out the top, and that's not really the optimal way to mount that, because at the top of the tank, any air that's in the radiator, and there's always air in a radiator, you have to have some expansion space for the fluid as it heats up. But when your lines are at the top, your air then can be sucked into the return line and pulled into the pump, and you'll get some gurgling and bubbling sounds from your pump. Worst case, you could cavitate in the pump and not move any coolant. That's probably unlikely, but it can happen. So this particular orientation like this, with the lines at the bottom and the pump over here, would be the optimal way to mount it. And the next way is to put the radiator, if I can get it fished back through here, in a position where, almost got it, in a position where your lines are, of course, facing down like that, and then your pump is somewhere here in the middle. That would be probably the second most optimal way if you can do that. But like this is really not the best way, although you see it that way in a lot of manufacturers, their literature and the way they show it, but that's probably not the best way. And here is the second box. I actually thought that I'd been shorted some of the hardware, but they actually put it inside this box here. So those are the motherboard screws and some Velcro straps. So what's inside of here beyond that? This is a top panel, and when we get the case all together, I'll show it. It will be more impressive at that point. But this is the very top decorative piece that goes on the top if you don't use the covers, and it has a magnetic perimeter here to sort of hold it in place. And here's the alternative front panel. If you don't want to use that solid panel, this mesh panel with this honeycomb grid in the back, you can use this. This will certainly allow more air through the front of the case. Now I'm getting the motherboard installed. This is the Asus Strix Z390E Gaming, and with the inverted motherboard layout, it just seems like I'm putting in everything upside down. It's going to take a while to get used to that. But if you're a first-time system builder, what you want to do is, after you get your motherboard sort of set in position and you get your screws started, don't tighten the first screw down. Get all of the screws started. Depending upon the motherboard form factor, you've got different numbers of screws. But just kind of get them all started, because you probably will have to wiggle the motherboard around a little bit to get the holes to all line up. And then after you get all the screws started and everything is in position, then you can start tightening the screws down. And the other thing, while you're tightening your screws, make sure that you don't use a lot of force. You don't want your screwdriver to slip and rake it across your motherboard. That would be bad. And if the screws don't turn real smoothly, they should just be buttery smooth. If you have any issues with screws not turning, don't force them. You will strip them out and cause yourself all kinds of problems. So if you get one that doesn't want to go in smoothly, back it out, try again, try to make sure the screw is lined up with the hole there, and you might even try a different screw if one just is being stubborn and won't go in. But the big thing is, do not force it. Now some people like to lay the case flat and put the motherboard in that way. Other times people like to work with them vertically like this. It just depends. It is easier sometimes to lay the case down flat, but I've done it both ways, and it works. The motherboard is all installed, and I'll also post a link to the review I did for the Darkbase 900 Pro. That's a case that is even larger than this one. It's a real brute, but you can see the differences between the two cases. And I was going to use, I have the Dark Power Pro 1000 watt power supply from Be Quiet, but it's tied up in another system along with the other case, the Darkbase Pro 900. So I'll be using this Fractal Design, what is this, the Ion, I think this is an Ion 600, 660, something like that. But I just happen to have this one already out, so we'll just use it and stick with this Asus motherboard for the system build. The power supply is now being installed, and what's kind of neat about this is this bracket, you actually attach this bracket here to the power supply, and then you can slide the power supply in from outside of the case, from the back of the case. Usually you have to come in from the side and sort of angle it in there, and this way with this bracket it just makes it so much nicer to install or remove if you have to. So as I'm looking at this, the way the cables here, you know, when the motherboard tray was flipped over, these came out against the back side or the front side of the motherboard tray, either way. And I don't like the way they sort of dangled down here, so I'm kind of wondering, when the motherboard tray is in the inverted position here, if there's a way I can make them come out over here on the opposite side of the I/O panel. So what I did, there's a screw right here, there's one on the opposite side, and the same thing on the very back, there's a screw back here. So you take those 4 screws out, and you can lift this top off. I don't know if the manufacturer intended for you to take this thing apart to this degree or not, but I'm going to give it a shot. Now when you take that top off, when you put it back on, you got to make sure these line up. These are the push buttons that you push to disengage the side panels. So you just want to make sure those are lined up. And then looking at the I/O panel itself, there are actually a couple of screws. There's one right here and one back here, a little hard to see. So when you take those screws out, that frees up this I/O panel to pop out. So you can see the cables all sort of disappear there to the right, and I'm just wondering if I can make them switch them around so they come out over here on this side, which would make them more convenient to come out on the back side of the motherboard tray there. Alright, so these cables are sort of all tied and anchored to some the components, the other cables here. And after I disconnected those and freed them up, it looks like I can pull this all the way through and then feed the cables through over here on this side to make the build a little cleaner. So now I took the screws out over here. This is your radiator or fan mount bracket. So it has to come out as I drop everything on the floor. And it looks like the opening here where the cables come through, it won't be big enough for like the USB cable. So this bracket right here, this plastic, these are the rails or the guide rails for that fan bracket. And there's a screw right here and one on the other side. So if I can get this out, then that should open this pathway up for the cables. And yeah, I'm making a lot more work for myself, but I just want to show that it can be done. And I took the second screw out for this little bracket. This is the side rail again, that top radiator bracket, or that top radiator and fan mount here. That's what it slides in right there, that little groove. So now that frees up the cables to go anywhere I want to put them. So I'll just move them over to the other side and put everything back together. Alright, so I have all the cables now pushed through the other side since the motherboard tray there is inverted. So that will make for a much cleaner system build because I don't have all those cables cutting across there. But now I do have to move the fans. I have to flip them over 180 so that these cables come out on the other side, which will make it look a lot nicer. Because if I'm going to go to the trouble to move these, well, it's really not that big of a deal to just flip the fans over 180. Now, one thing I will say, you know, these cables from the factory are coming out on this side, so they're all sort of bent in that direction, and they're kind of stiff, and they don't really want to go in this orientation at first. So you sort of have to be very careful. But when you bolt down the I/O panel, and I already have the cover on so you can't see it, but the two screws that hold this plastic housing for the I/O panel, you really need to make sure when you put this screw in on this side that you're not pinching any of these cables. So, and that's really the hardest part, if you can sort of wiggle these cables in and out, push them in and out, then that should be an indication that these things aren't pinched. So that's probably the hardest part of it, but it will go a long way towards making the build look a lot cleaner. Alright, so I got the first fan out, and I want to point out that the screws back here, as you can see, there's a little rubber washer and they're sticky. So make sure when you take those screws out, or if you take the screws out, that you keep track of these little washers. Okay, finally I got the fans flipped around there, so everything that needs to come out on this side of the case now comes out on this side of the case. So the physical part of flipping the motherboard tray over was very easy, but it took about the same amount of time, or actually a little more, mainly because I was unfamiliar with it. But it took some time there to get all of the cables flipped around. And really, you didn't have to do that, but it just looks a lot better. And now it's time for the cooler. We'll be using this new one from Be Quiet. This is the Pure Loop 360. I just reviewed it, so you can check out that link there in the details if you want more information on that one. So here's the cooler already out of the box and ready to go. And what I need to do is get this bracket off right here, because I need access to the back of the motherboard to get the bracket on there for the coolant pump. And here's the bracket. Now I already have the studs on there and these little rubber O-rings that you push over the studs. That's what helps keep the studs from falling off of this bracket. So the first thing is I have to line up the holes there, and then the bracket should stay there till I get around to the other side, where I have to put all these fasteners on and these two brackets here to secure the pump to the motherboard. Alright, so I'm getting everything buttoned up here before I put the power on. And the way these panels drop in at the bottom, and then you just rock them at the top, that is really nice. I like that. I know sometimes it can be a real struggle trying to get these back panels on if you have any wiring interference at all, but not with this case. So we got everything installed, and the only funny part about it is, of course, with the motherboard flipped upside down, I'm normally trying to plug things in into places that are now 180 degrees off. So several times I had to stop myself because I'm trying to look for a connector or a socket that isn't there. Now I did just go back. I had this cable here coming up through the hole right there, but when I went to put this little plate back in, and really this is just for aesthetics, it doesn't have to be that way, but of course it sort of covered that hole, and there was no way for the cable to run, so I had to actually run it up through the grommet. But if you don't use these, if you want to leave this ventilated section open, then there are holes for passing a cable through. And now I have all of the floor panels in there and the PSU shroud. And there was that bracket right here for the hard drive cage. I just left it there. If I were going to need to use that hard drive cage though, I would have to transfer that bracket over to this side. Alright, well this is a little embarrassing. I fire it up and I get a CPU fan error. You know why? Because I forgot to put the fans in all the excitement. So I got the first fan started there. I just have to get the other two in there and plugged into the motherboard. Alright, so let's try this again. Alright, so like I always say, make sure you take your time and you won't skip things like cooling fans, for example. So now it is all powered up, so we'll get the side panels back on there. So I got everything back together. Those are the sound deadening top panels. They're removable, and I'll show the other panel there in a moment. Of course, it has the solid front panel. And remember, air is drawn in from the two vented sides there, one on either side of the front. And then the only bad thing with the glass side panels is there's so much reflection. So anyway, there's the side with everything covered up. And then the top. So really I need to put the two other panels on here. And these are pretty easy to pop off. And you just lift it up, take the one panel off, and this is the new one here. Get that set in there and then pop it in. And there is the front. I should say the mesh front, and that really looks nice. As for the top, we can just pop these two panels off. Now these, remember, these do have the insulation, sound deadening insulation in them, and then they also have the magnets at the corners. Now this one doesn't have any of the insulation, but of course it's vented. And then the top vented section sits right in there like that. And there you go. And that really looks nice if you want to go with the full vented look there. Since Be Quiet has built their reputation on being quiet, I have the solid panels in, and the fans are all at the lowest speed possible. They're all in silent mode, including the top radiator fans, which you can't really see there. So this is sort of a best case. I'll use my decibel meter here. All right, now what I'll do is crank the fan speed all the way up, and we'll see what difference there is with that. This is just the cased fans by themselves. The radiator fans are still silent. So you can see it's a little louder, and this is with the radiator fans at full speed. I have the mesh panels in now on the top and on the front, so everything is again in silent mode with the fan speeds at their minimum. And now I'll go ahead and crank up just the case fans. So now only the case fans are running at maximum. And I do that here with the switch on top. The switch has 3 settings, and then there's an auto mode, which then runs off your motherboard signal for fan speed. But I'll run them all the way up to the maximum. Oops, it turned off. And now I will crank up the fans for the cooler. And the radiator fans are now cranked up, so the case fans and the radiator fans are at their maximum. And as far as airflow, I mean, you've got the entire case floor is ventilated. Air can be pulled in through there. The back of the case, there's quite a bit of open space for air to pass through. Of course, the entire top is vented. The front is vented, and if you're concerned about airflow or the front fans being able to get enough air, when the front solid panel is on, remember you have these sides that are also ventilated, and you can see now that I pulled this off, the fans can pull the air in, comes in from the front here, and it can certainly be pulled in right there. If we flip this around, you can see that's all open, so the air has a clear path to get to the fans. Now, of course, that's going to be a little more restrictive than if you run with the mesh front, which is sitting right there, but I don't think I would be too concerned about the fans being starved for air if you want to run the solid front cover. And don't forget, you can get up to a 420 millimeter radiator in the front. Alright, so I've got the thermal camera out, and this is just a cool way to sort of see where the heat is concentrated. I've got the fans all cranked up, CPU and GPU are stressed to sort of produce the maximum amount of heat. Now there's a lot of reflection coming off the glass here, so I'm going to come around the front. And the color just means the temperature differential, not necessarily a specific temperature. So of course at the top here we're going to see where the radiator is. So the almost white color there is where the most heat is. And then we'll look at the back side. There should be a warm spot that you can see where the CPU is. Maybe, maybe not. Actually, all of that sound insulation on the back of this cover is almost acting like a thermal barrier too, because you have to go all the way up to the top corner here before you see any real heat. And then looking at the back, of course the top of the case here where it's vented, you can see my thumb there. There's a lot of heat coming out of there, which is good. And then there's the GPU. Come down around the bottom, there's the exhaust fan right in there. And down here, of course, is the power supply. So looking again at the other side, again, there's glass here, so you get a lot of reflection off of that, but you can certainly see where the hot spot is. So that was some fun with the thermal camera. I really like the look of the case actually with the solid panels and the mesh panels. But for me, with the top radiator, I would definitely go with the mesh panel on top. So the case comes in a couple of different flavors actually. There's an all-white version, and there's a windowed version of it in all-white, and there's also a windowed version of it in the all-black, and of course this is the windowed version. Now this particular setup is $169 right now. That's the retail price. And given the fit, finish, quality, functionality, modularity of this case, I'm going to have to give this one the Overclockers Club Editor's Choice Award. And a quick recap of all the features that I like, starting with the button here you push to simply remove the side panels. They come off so easily and they pop right back on. I love that feature. I love the dust collection here, the dust filter panels that are so easy to remove, pop back on. There's one behind the front panel that's also easy to get to. I love the vertical GPU mount. I really like the way you can flip the motherboard over here, the entire chassis for the inverted motherboard layout. I like the way you can pop these little floor covers out. You can put a fan underneath this one if you want. A couple of hard drives down here. You can remove this power supply shroud. All these block off plates to make it look nice. If you don't have hard drives there, but if you want to put hard drives there, you can add those. I mean, just overall, the case is really, really nice. And again, I like the way you've got these solid and mesh panels that you can interchange. So a great case. So this is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching. Post some comments and I'll answer any questions that you have as best I can. Don't forget to subscribe.